The blizzard howled outside like a wounded animal as I trudged through knee-deep snow toward the small, unmarked service entrance. My breath hung in the air, crystallizing instantly in the minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit Alaskan night. The facility's main entrance was a mile back, nestled between towering pine trees dusted with snow, all gleaming metal and biometric scanners. But that wasn't for me. I belonged to the shadows of this place, to the parts nobody wanted to think about. I'd been the night janitor at Facility 7432-B for almost 6 months now. 6 months of silence broken only by the hum of fluorescent lights and the squeak of my mop bucket wheels against polished floors. 6 months of pretending I didn't notice the strange stains that sometimes appeared overnight, or the odd noises that echoed through the ventilation system when I was alone on Sublevel 3. My supervisor, Dr. Emerson, had been crystal clear during my orientation. "Follow the rules, Mr. Nash. That's all you need to do. Follow the rules, and you'll be fine." He'd handed me a worn leather notebook filled with handwritten instructions, some crossed out, others added in different colored inks and different handwriting. The first page had a simple warning: deviation from protocol results in immediate termination. I didn't think they meant firing me. The service entrance recognized my keycard with a soft beep, and the heavy steel door slid open with a hiss of warm air. I stamped my boots on the grate, shaking off snow and ice before stepping into the small decontamination chamber. This was the first rule. Always use the service entrance between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. Never attempt to enter through the main doors during night shift. As the UV lights flickered on, bathing me in purple-blue light, I pulled out the leather notebook from my inner pocket and flipped through the familiar pages. Tonight was Wednesday, which meant I needed to start on Sublevel 4 and work my way up, avoiding Sublevel 2 entirely between the hours of 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. I still didn't know what happened on Sublevel 2 during those hours, and I didn't want to find out. The decontamination cycle finished with a soft ding, and the inner door unlocked. I gathered my courage, like I did every night, before pushing it open and stepping into the sterile white hallway beyond. The facility was quiet, save for the distant hum of machinery and the soft whir of air recyclers. Time to begin my shift. Time to follow the rules. Rule 1. Always wear your ID badge visibly on your outer clothing. If your badge changes color, leave immediately through the nearest emergency exit. Rule 2. Never enter rooms marked with a red triangle, even if the lights are on and someone calls for help from inside. Rule 3. If you see a puddle of clear liquid on the floor, do not mop it up. Mark its location on your map and report it to Dr. Emerson in the morning. Rule 4. If you hear someone calling your first name, do not respond. If they call your full name, run to the nearest green-lit room and lock the door. Rule 5. The thing in the loading bay is not a dog, regardless of what it looks like. Do not approach it. Do not feed it. Do not make eye contact. I took a deep breath and pushed my cleaning cart forward. Wednesday nights were always the worst. Something about the way the wind howled through the exterior vents. Or maybe it was the way the shadows seemed to stretch just a little longer on this particular night. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The elevators in this facility didn't operate during night shifts, another rule I wasn't meant to question. Instead, I made my way to the service stairwell, its concrete steps worn smooth from years of use. I didn't know what exactly happened in Facility 7432-B during daylight hours. I wasn't meant to know. All I knew was what Dr. Emerson had told me during my interview. We study anomalies in the permafrost, things that should stay frozen. I reached Sublevel 4 at exactly 10:37 p.m., right on schedule. This was the deepest level of the facility I was permitted to access, though I'd occasionally caught glimpses of researchers entering an unmarked door that I suspected led to even lower levels. The air down here was different, colder, despite the climate control, with a faint metallic tang that coated the back of my throat. Sub-level 4 housed the laboratories where they studied their samples. I never saw what these samples were, but sometimes I'd catch scientists in heated arguments, their lab coats spattered with substances that didn't look quite like any liquid I'd ever seen. Tonight, the labs were empty. The only sound the soft hum of refrigeration units and the occasional ping from monitoring equipment. Rule number 17. When cleaning laboratories on sub-level 4, do not look directly into any containment units, even if they appear empty. I kept my eyes fixed firmly on the floor as I began mopping the long central corridor. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed intermittently, creating a staccato rhythm that set my teeth on edge. On the wall, a large digital clock displayed both the time, 10:42 p.m., and the external temperature, minus 43 degrees Fahrenheit. Below it, a smaller display showed something labeled PF integrity, 98.7%, that fluctuated by tenths of percentage points every few minutes. The first hour of my shift passed uneventfully. I cleaned the main lab corridors, emptied waste bins, careful to follow rule number 23. Never empty bins marked with a yellow biohazard symbol. Report them to morning staff. And polished the endless stretches of steel and glass that made up this sterile underworld. I avoided looking at my reflection in the glass. Rule number 29 was very specific about that after midnight. At precisely 11:45 p.m., the lights throughout the level dimmed for exactly 10 seconds before returning to normal brightness. This happened every night, and it was listed in my rule book under expected anomalies. Nothing to worry about, just a power redistribution. Still, I always found myself holding my breath during those 10 seconds of semi-darkness, straining to hear if anything moved in the shadows. Just as I was finishing the east wing of the sublevel, I heard it. A soft tapping sound coming from inside one of the labs. 3 quick taps, followed by 2 slow ones. My hand instinctively moved to the notebook in my pocket, flipping to the section on unexpected sounds. Rule number 31. If you hear tapping from inside a laboratory, count the pattern. 3. Quick, 2 slow means evacuation testing and can be ignored. Any other pattern, leave the sub-level immediately and note it in your report. 3 quick, 2 slow. I exhaled slowly. Just an evacuation test. Nothing to worry about. I continued mopping, but kept my ears alert for any deviation in the pattern. The intercom system crackled to life suddenly, making me jump and nearly knock over my bucket. Maintenance worker on sub-level 4, please acknowledge. The voice was female, clinical, slightly distorted by static. I froze, mop clutched in white-knuckled hands. There was no scheduled communication during night shifts. I flipped frantically through my notebook. Rule number 12. The intercom system is deactivated between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. Any announcements heard during this time are not from facility staff. Do not respond. My heart hammered against my ribs as I continued mopping, trying to appear as though I hadn't heard anything. The intercom crackled again. James Nash, please acknowledge. Your assistance is required in Laboratory 4C. Ice flooded my veins. They'd used my full name. Rule number 4 flashed in my mind. Run to the nearest green-lit room and lock the door. I abandoned my mop and cart, scanning the corridor desperately for a green light. There, at the far end of the hall, a small storage room with a green indicator above the door. James Nash, why are you running? We only need your help with a small spill. The voice sounded closer somehow, as if it were no longer coming from the intercom, but from just around the corner. I sprinted down the corridor, boots squeaking on the freshly mopped floor. breath coming in ragged gasps. Something about the voice had changed, too. A slight elongation of the vowels, a wet quality to the consonants. I reached the green-lit room and yanked the door open, throwing myself inside and slamming it shut behind me. My trembling fingers fumbled with the lock, finally managing to slide the bolt into place. The small room was little more than a closet, lined with shelves of cleaning supplies and spare parts. A single bulb cast harsh shadows across the cramped space. Rule number 4 continued. Once inside, wait 15 minutes. If you hear nothing, it is safe to exit. If scratching begins at the door, remain inside until 5 a.m., then exit and proceed directly to the service entrance. I sank to the floor, back against the door, notebook clutched to my chest like a shield. My watch read 12:03 a.m. The room was silent save for my own labored breathing and the distant hum of the facility's systems. Then I heard it. A soft, squelching sound moving down the hallway outside, like something wet dragging itself across the floor. It paused outside the door. "James," the voice called, no longer attempting to sound human. Why hide from us? We've been so curious about the one who cleans our halls at night, the one who sees but doesn't see. I pressed my hand over my mouth to stifle any sound, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. The thing outside the door made a noise like water being forced through a too narrow pipe. "We know you're in there, James Nash. We can smell you. So warm, so full of life. Not like us. We've been frozen for so long." My watch read 12:07 a.m., 8 more minutes to wait. I could do this. I had to do this. "The others won't tell you the truth," the voice continued, taking on multiple tones simultaneously, like a chorus of speakers. "About what they found in the ice. About what they woke up. About what's already escaped." A long, wet appendage slid under the door, iridescent and quivering. I scrambled back against the shelves, knocking over bottles of cleaning solution that clattered loudly in the small space. The appendage retracted suddenly, and I heard what sounded like multiple bodies moving quickly away from the door. Moments later, the heavy footsteps of security personnel echoed down the corridor. "Security sweep in progress," announced a new voice over the intercom, this one deeper and official sounding. "All personnel remain in current positions until sweep is complete." I stayed frozen in place, unsure if this was another trick. My watch read 12:15 a.m. The 15 minutes were up, but I wasn't taking any chances. I'd wait for the security team to pass. The footsteps grew louder, then stopped outside my door. A sharp knock made me jump. "Maintenance staff, identify yourself," called a gruff voice. I swallowed hard. Rule number 44. If approached by security during a lockdown scenario, state your ID number and current assignment. Do not mention any anomalous events unless directly questioned. "J. James Nash, ID 7891-M, I called out, my voice surprisingly steady. "Night cleaning, sub-level 4. A moment of silence then. "Reason for current position?" I hesitated. "Protocol adherence, sir. Rule number 4. Another pause. "Understood. Remain in place until the all clear is sounded. Do not exit under any circumstances." The footsteps moved away, continuing their patrol of the sub-level. I leaned back against the shelves, adrenaline still coursing through my system. Something had happened tonight. Something beyond the usual strangeness of Facility 7432-B. And somehow, I'd become a part of it. The emergency light above the door suddenly switched from green to blue. There was no rule for blue lights. I stared at the blue light, my mind racing to recall if I'd ever seen it mentioned in the notebook. The leather-bound rulebook had become my lifeline in this place, but now it seemed to have failed me. With trembling fingers, I pulled it out and frantically flipped through the pages again. Nothing. Not a single mention of blue lights. I checked my watch. 12:37 a.m. I'd been huddled in this storage closet for over 30 minutes, far longer than the 15 minutes rule number 4 prescribed. Outside, the facility had gone completely silent. No footsteps of the security team, no mechanical hums, not even the omnipresent whir of the ventilation system. Just absolute, smothering silence. My cleaning schedule was precise. By now I should have finished sub-level 4 and moved up to sub-level 3. Dr. Emerson was very clear about keeping to the schedule. Deviations attracted attention, he'd said, though he never specified from what. I weighed my options. Stay in this closet with the unexplained blue light until my shift ended, potentially violating other rules I didn't know about, or venture out and continue my duties, risking whatever had triggered the blue light in the first place. A soft clicking sound from my pocket made the decision for me. My ID badge, the one that was never supposed to change color, was now pulsing with a faint blue luminescence that matched the light above the door. "Shit," I whispered, the word hanging in the stagnant air. Rule number 1 was clear. If your badge changes color, leave immediately through the nearest emergency exit. But the nearest exit was on the other end of sub-level 4, past whatever had been dragging itself down the hallway earlier. I pressed my ear against the door, straining to hear any signs of movement outside. Nothing. Taking a deep breath, I slowly turned the lock and cracked the door open a fraction of an inch. The corridor beyond was bathed in an eerie blue glow. All the regular white fluorescent lights had been replaced by the same cobalt illumination as the light above my door. My stomach dropped as I realized this wasn't just a local phenomenon. Something had changed throughout the entire facility. I slipped out of the storage closet, keeping my back to the wall as I edged along the corridor. My cleaning cart was where I'd abandoned it, but something was wrong. The mop handle had been snapped in half, and the bucket was tipped over, its contents frozen solid on the floor, despite the climate-controlled environment. My ID badge continued to pulse rhythmically in my pocket, the blue glow seeping through the fabric of my uniform. I pulled it out, studying it more carefully. The photo of my face seemed subtly wrong. My eyes slightly too wide, my smile a bit too stretched. I needed to get to that emergency exit. The labs that had been vacant earlier now had their blinds drawn, but I could see movements behind them. Silhouettes that didn't move quite right, bending and shifting in ways that human bodies shouldn't be able to. "Don't look directly at them," I muttered to myself, recalling rule number 17. "Just get to the exit." I picked up my pace, moving as quietly as possible past the laboratories. The emergency exit was located at the end of the east wing, past the cryogenics lab where they stored their core samples. I'd never been inside that lab. It was marked with a red triangle, but I'd always noted the heavy security measures surrounding it. Reinforced door, retinal scanner, and a constant security presence during day shifts. Tonight, the door to the cryogenics lab stood wide open, spilling blue light and frigid air into the corridor. I could feel the temperature dropping as I approached, my breath clouding more heavily with each step. Against my better judgment, I slowed as I passed, unable to resist a glimpse inside. The lab was in chaos. Storage units lay open, their contents empty. Monitoring equipment blinked with red warning lights, creating a purple haze where they mixed with the blue illumination. And on the floor, partially frozen in a puddle of clear liquid, was a security guard's uniform, empty, but laid out as if still containing a body. I quickened my pace, nearly running now. The emergency exit was just ahead, its red sign a welcome contrast to the pervasive blue glow. I reached for the push bar, relief flooding through me. "James Nash," came a voice from behind me, familiar and businesslike. "I'm disappointed." I whirled around to see Dr. Emerson standing in the corridor, clipboard in hand, dressed in his usual immaculate lab coat. His presence was so normal, so out of place in the current situation, that for a moment I wondered if I'd imagined the entire episode. "Dr. Emerson? What's happening? My badge changed color and the rules say—" Yes, the rules," he interrupted, adjusting his glasses. "You've been quite diligent about following them, until tonight." "I followed rule number 4 exactly," I protested. "There was an announcement with my full name, so I locked myself in a green-lit room." Dr. Emerson consulted his clipboard, frowning. "Yes, that part you did correctly, but you stayed too long. Rule number 4 clearly states 15 minutes, then proceed with your duties. Instead, you remained hidden for—" He checked his watch. 37 minutes, allowing the situation to escalate to a blue light protocol. "There's nothing in my rulebook about blue lights," I said, pulling out the leather notebook as evidence. Dr. Emerson peered at me with something like pity. "That's peculiar. Let me see that." Reluctantly, I handed over the notebook. Dr. Emerson flipped through it, his frown deepening. "This is incomplete," he said finally. "Pages have been removed. The blue light protocol should be detailed on page 27 between the sections on emergency communications and power fluctuations." I stared at him, a chill that had nothing to do with the facility's dropping temperature spreading through me. "I never removed any pages. That's exactly how it was given to me." Dr. Emerson's expression hardened. "And who exactly gave you this notebook, Mr. Nash?" "You did," I answered, confusion mounting. "During my orientation." The scientist's face went completely blank for a moment, like a computer resetting. Then he smiled, the expression not quite reaching his eyes. "No, I don't believe I did," he said softly. "I've never conducted an orientation for maintenance staff. That would be beneath my station." Something was very wrong. I took a step back, bumping against the emergency exit. "Dr. Emerson, I don't understand what's happening, but my badge changed color and I need to leave." Dr. Emerson's smile widened, stretching just a fraction too far across his face. James. You misunderstand the purpose of these rules. They're not designed to keep you safe." He took a step closer, and I noticed for the first time that his shoes made no sound on the hard floor. "They're designed to keep us contained." A cold realization washed over me. "You're not Dr. Emerson." The thing wearing Dr. Emerson's face tilted its head at an impossible angle. "I am now, and soon I'll be you as well. That's why we need your rulebook, you see, to understand your behaviors, to mimic them perfectly." I pushed against the emergency exit, but to my horror, it didn't budge. The thing that wasn't Dr. Emerson noticed my panic and chuckled, the sound bubbling like liquid nitrogen. "Emergency exits only function during genuine facility emergencies, Mr. Nash. This is merely a containment breach. A common occurrence, really." "The real Dr. Emerson, is he—" "Still very much alive," the creature assured me, its voice shifting subtly to match the scientist's tone more perfectly. "For now. We need him intact to access the deeper levels, just as we need you intact to maintain our cover during night hours." My mind raced, searching for any rule that might help me in this situation. "The security team? They were real?" "Oh yes." Nod Emerson nodded. "Very real and very dead. We're not wasteful, though. Their biomass will be repurposed." I felt sick. "What are you?" The creature straightened its posture, adjusting Dr. Emerson's lab coat with fastidious care. We are what was found in the deep ice, what should have remained frozen. A visitor from an older Earth, you might say. It smiled again, teeth too numerous and too sharp. But enough chatter. You have duties to perform, and we have a facility to redecorate. It reached into its pocket and pulled out a new ID badge, holding it out to me. The photo showed my face, but with the same subtly wrong quality I'd noticed on my current badge. Eyes too wide, smile too fixed. Your old badge is malfunctioning. Take this one. I stared at the offered badge, mind whirling. There had to be a way out of this. Some rule, some protocol. And then it hit me. Rule number 38. In case of impersonation by facility entities, create a paradoxical scenario. They cannot process contradictions. Before I take that, I said carefully, I need to verify you're authorized. What's the password? The creature paused, its confident demeanor faltering slightly. Password? There is no password for badge distribution. Exactly, I replied. A real staff member would know that. But you also insisted you're Dr. Emerson, who would be authorized to distribute badges. So which is it? Are you unauthorized, or are you not Dr. Emerson? The creature's form flickered momentarily, like a television with poor reception. Its face contorted in confusion, features briefly melting before resolidifying. That's not... You can't. I pressed my advantage. And if emergency exits only function during genuine emergencies, but this is merely a containment breach, then why are all the lights blue? Is this an emergency or isn't it? The creature made a high-pitched, keening sound, its form becoming less stable. Dr. Emerson's features began to blur, revealing something pale and multi-eyed beneath the human disguise. Behind me, I heard the emergency exit click as it unlocked. You think yourself clever, the creature hissed, its voice no longer attempting to sound human. But you've only bought yourself time. We are already throughout this facility. We are in the walls, in the air. We are learning. I pushed the emergency exit open, feeling the blast of frigid Alaskan air against my back. Tell me one thing. Are there any real rules that can stop you? The creature's form was rapidly dissolving now, unable to maintain its human shape under the stress of the contradictions. It let out a sound that might have been laughter. Only one. It gurgled as it collapsed into a writhing puddle on the floor. Rule 0. Nothing leaves the ice that was not there before. I backed through the emergency exit, which led to a narrow stairwell climbing up toward the surface. As the heavy door swung shut between us, I saw the puddle that had been pretending to be Dr. Emerson beginning to reform, reaching out with pseudopods that grasped at the air. We'll be waiting when you return, James Nash, it called after me. No one survives a night shift alone in these conditions. You'll be back. The door sealed with a pneumatic hiss, leaving me alone in the dark stairwell, with only the pulsing blue light of my ID badge to guide my way up toward the surface. The emergency stairwell was illuminated only by my pulsing blue badge and small red emergency bulbs placed at intervals that seemed deliberately too far apart. I climbed as quickly as I dared, listening for any signs of pursuit while trying not to slip on the ice-slick steps. The metal railings were cold enough to burn my palms when I gripped them, forcing me to navigate the steep stairs with one hand pulled into my sleeve for protection. My watch read 1:23 a.m. If this had been a normal night, I'd be on sub-level 3 by now, carefully avoiding the rooms marked with blue hexagons, which were only to be entered on Mondays between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. But tonight was anything but normal. 6 flights up, I reached a landing with a door marked Surface Access, Authorized Personnel Only. I paused, panting, my breath forming thick clouds in the freezing air. The facility schematics I'd memorized during my training indicated this should lead to a small outbuilding about a quarter-mile from the main entrance. I pushed through the door and emerged into the howling Alaskan night. The blizzard had intensified, reducing visibility to just a few feet. Snow whipped against my face, instantly numbing any exposed skin. I was dressed for the climate-controlled interior of the facility, not for the brutal Arctic winter, just my navy blue uniform with a thin thermal layer underneath. Rule number 61 flashed through my mind. In case of emergency evacuation, proceed to Checkpoint Alpha for extraction. All personnel will be accounted for. Checkpoint Alpha was a small cabin located half a mile east of the facility, equipped with emergency supplies and a satellite phone. But which direction was east in this whiteout? I squinted against the driving snow, trying to get my bearings. The outbuilding I'd emerged from was barely visible behind me, its outline already being erased by the accumulating snow. I pulled my badge from my pocket, wondering if its strange blue glow might somehow help me navigate. To my surprise, the pulsing had taken on a directional quality, stronger when I faced one particular direction, fainter when I turned away. Was it guiding me or luring me? With no better option, I decided to follow where the badge pulsed strongest. I tucked it partly back in my pocket, leaving enough exposed to see its glow, and set off into the storm. The snow was deep and powdery, making each step a labor. The wind cut through my uniform like it was made of tissue paper, and within minutes, I couldn't feel my ears or nose. I had to keep moving. Hypothermia would kill me long before I reached any shelter if I stopped. Time became meaningless as I trudged through the endless white. My world narrowed to the small circle of visibility around me and the rhythmic pulsing of the badge guiding my steps. My thoughts grew sluggish as the cold seeped deeper into my body. How long had I been walking? Minutes? Hours? Just as my legs were about to give out, I saw it. A faint yellow light cutting through the swirling snow. Checkpoint Alpha. I summoned my remaining strength and pushed forward, finally making out the shape of a small, sturdy cabin. I stumbled up the 3 wooden steps to the door, my numb fingers struggling with the handle. It swung open, and I collapsed inside, quickly pulling the door shut behind me to keep out the killing cold. The cabin was blessedly warm, heated by a small propane furnace in one corner. It was a simple space. A table with a satellite phone, several cabinets likely containing supplies, a cot against one wall, and a small bathroom area separated by a curtain. Standard emergency shelter setup. I lay on the floor for several minutes, allowing feeling to painfully return to my extremities, before finally pulling myself up to inspect my surroundings more carefully. The satellite phone caught my attention first. I staggered to the table and picked up the receiver, relief washing over me when I heard a dial tone. I paused, receiver in hand, suddenly realizing I didn't know who to call. The facility had an emergency number, but after what I'd seen, I couldn't trust anyone associated with it. The police? Would they even believe me? And how would they reach me in this blizzard? As I debated, I noticed a laminated card next to the phone with a single number written on it, labeled simply, "Contingency." I dialed before I could second-guess myself. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times before connecting with a click. "Verification code?" requested a neutral, professional voice. I froze. Verification code? I hadn't been given any codes for emergency situations. My eyes darted around the cabin, searching for anything that might help, when they landed on my still-pulsing ID badge. Below my photo and name was a string of digits I'd never paid attention to before. 79328. 79328, I said, voice hoarse from the cold and fear. A pause then. Facility identification? 7432-B. I replied. Another pause, longer this time. Nature of contingency? I took a deep breath. Containment breach, blue light protocol. They've taken over most of the facility. Impersonating staff. Dr. Emerson, or something pretending to be him, said they were found in the deep ice. The line was silent for so long I thought the connection had been lost. Finally, the voice returned, tighter and more clipped than before. Understood. Extraction is impossible during current weather conditions. You are instructed to maintain position at checkpoint Alpha until the storm clears, approximately 0900 hours. Further instructions will follow. The voice hesitated, then added, Do not allow anyone else to enter the checkpoint, regardless of their appearance or claims. Confirm compliance. I understand, I said, a chill that had nothing to do with the outside temperature running down my spine. No one enters until you contact me again. Correct. Supplies are in the northeast cabinet. Weapon is under the cot mattress. Use only as a last resort. The line went dead. Weapon? I hurried to the cot and lifted the thin mattress, revealing a matte black pistol and 2 magazines. I'd never fired a gun before, but I picked it up anyway, checking that a round was chambered as I'd seen people do in movies. Next, I explored the supply cabinet, finding military-style MREs, bottled water, a first aid kit, and winter gear, including a heavy parka, insulated pants, gloves, and boots. I changed immediately, sighing with relief as proper insulation finally began to warm my frozen body. My watch read 2:47 a.m. The storm was projected to last until 9 a.m., which meant more than 6 hours of waiting alone in this cabin, hoping the thing that had impersonated Dr. Emerson couldn't follow my tracks through the snow. I ate one of the MREs without really tasting it, my mind replaying the events of the night. What had they found in the ice? How many of the facility staff had been replaced? Had any of them ever been real? Had Dr. Emerson ever been real? Or had I been taking instructions from one of these things from the beginning? The rule book. I pulled it from my pocket, studying it with new suspicion. If some pages had been removed as the false Dr. Emerson claimed, who had removed them? And why give me an incomplete set of rules? Was I being set up to fail from the start? I flipped through it page by page, examining each one carefully. The handwriting varied throughout, as did the ink colors, suggesting multiple authors over time. Some rules had been crossed out, others annotated with cryptic notes. I'd never questioned this before, assuming it was just the accumulated wisdom of previous maintenance staff. On page 15, I found something odd. Between rules number 32 and number 33 was a small tear, as if a very narrow strip of paper had been removed. Holding the book up to the cabin's light, I could just make out the ghost of writing that had pressed through from the missing strip. Just 2 words. They lie. I was still puzzling over this when a sharp knock at the door made me jump so violently I dropped the book. "Hello?" called a woman's voice, trembling with cold and fear. "Is anyone in there? Please, I need help." I froze, the mysterious caller's warning echoing in my mind. Do not allow anyone else to enter the checkpoint, regardless of their appearance or claims. I'm from the facility, the voice continued, sounding desperate now. There's been some kind of outbreak. I managed to escape, but I'm freezing out here. Please. I picked up the pistol, holding it with both hands as I approached the door. Who are you? I called, keeping my voice steady with effort. Dr. Sarah Vox, Biochemistry Department. Please, I can't feel my hands anymore. I'm going to die out here. The name meant nothing to me. I'd never met a Dr. Vox during my time at the facility. But then I worked nights, and most of the scientific staff worked days. It was entirely possible there was a real Dr. Vox who had also escaped the facility. How did you find this place in the blizzard? I asked, stalling as I tried to decide what to do. A pause, then, I followed procedure. Checkpoint Alpha is the designated emergency rendezvous point. Please, my body temperature is dropping dangerously low. Her response was textbook perfect, which only made me more suspicious. I remembered how the false Dr. Emerson had spoken, formal, precise, like it was reciting information rather than speaking naturally. I'm under orders not to open the door for anyone, I said finally. That's absurd, the voice snapped, its tone shifting from pleading to angry in an instant. This is an official emergency checkpoint. You can't just... She cut herself off, then continued more calmly. Listen, we don't have to open the door fully. Just crack it enough for me to show you my ID. Then you'll know I'm legitimate. I bit my lip, considering. If she was human and I left her out there, she would die. But if she wasn't... My gaze fell on my ID badge, still pulsing with that strange blue light. The false Dr. Emerson had offered me a replacement badge. Was this some kind of identification system for them? A way to recognize each other? Slide your ID under the door, I suggested. I'll verify it that way. Another pause, longer this time. The badge is attached to my coat. I can't remove it in these temperatures without taking off my gloves, which would result in immediate frostbite. The hesitation was all I needed to hear. You're not Dr. Vox, I said, tightening my grip on the gun. You're one of them. The pounding on the door suddenly increased in intensity. Open this door, James Nash, the voice demanded, dropping all pretense of humanity. We've been so patient with you, but our patience has limits. I backed away from the door, keeping the gun trained on it as the pounding grew stronger, the whole cabin shaking with the force of the blows. Whatever was out there was far stronger than any human. The rules are there for a reason, James, the thing outside called, its voice shifting through multiple tones and timbres simultaneously. Not just for you, but for us. Boundaries, limitations. We're still learning what we can and cannot do in this form. I bumped into the table, nearly knocking over the satellite phone. An idea struck me. I could call for help again, tell them the creatures had found me. But as I reached for the receiver, the pounding suddenly stopped. The silence was somehow more terrifying than the noise had been. We see you've found the weapon, the voice said, now eerily calm. Do you think bullets can stop us? We, who survived being frozen for millennia? We, who can become anyone we touch? I stayed silent, listening intently for any sound of movement outside. But since you refuse to cooperate, we'll have to take a different approach. It continued. You're not the only one who escaped the facility tonight, James. Right now, others of us are tracking them. Dr. Lawson from Genetics, Security Officer Perez, and that pretty receptionist you always smile at when you think no one's watching. Eliza, isn't it? My heart sank. Eliza was real. The only staff member who'd ever treated me like a person, rather than part of the facility's machinery. We'd only spoken a few times during shift changes, but her smile had become something I looked forward to at the end of each grueling night. You're lying, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. Are we? It asked, sounding amused. How can you be sure? After all, you don't really know anything about this facility or what happens here, do you? You just follow your little rules and collect your paycheck. I heard a scraping sound from the roof of the cabin, like something heavy dragging itself across the surface. My eyes darted upward, tracking the noise as it moved toward one of the corners. The storm won't last forever, James, the voice called from directly above me now. And when it clears, you'll find you have nowhere to run. This is Alaska, hundreds of miles of nothing in every direction. You'll come back to us eventually, and when you do, we'll be waiting." The scraping stopped. For several minutes, I stood frozen in place, gun pointed at the ceiling, waiting for the next move in this terrifying game. But no further sounds came from outside. I checked my watch. 3:18 a.m., still nearly 6 hours until the extraction team could reach me. 6 hours alone in this cabin with only my thoughts and the knowledge that those things were out there, waiting. I sank down onto the cot, keeping the gun in my lap and my eyes on the door. The satellite phone remained silent. My ID badge continued its rhythmic blue pulsing, casting eerie shadows on the cabin walls. The rules had failed me, or I had failed to understand them. Either way, I was on my own now, caught between the deadly Alaskan wilderness and something even more dangerous lurking in the snow. The hours crawled by with excruciating slowness. Every creak of the cabin settling, every howl of the wind outside sent my heart racing, finger tensing on the trigger of the gun I barely knew how to use. I'd positioned myself in the corner with the best view of both the door and the small window, the satellite phone within arm's reach. By 4:30 a.m., my eyelids were growing heavy despite the adrenaline. I hadn't slept in almost 24 hours, and the constant state of terror was taking its toll. I needed to stay alert, but I also needed answers. I turned back to the rulebook, hoping to find something, anything, that might help me understand what was happening. This time, I didn't just read the rules. I analyzed the handwriting, the ink colors, looking for patterns I might have missed before. Most of the original rules appeared to be written in the same neat, precise script with blue ballpoint pen. Later editions used different pens, and the handwriting varied. Some neat, some hurried, as if added under duress. On page 22, a rule caught my eye that I hadn't paid much attention to before. Rule number 51. If you discover any documents labeled Project Thaw, do not read them. Seal them in the red envelopes found in security stations and place them in Dr. Emerson's Dropbox. Project Thaw. The name alone sent a chill through me. Was this what had led to tonight's events? I flipped forward, searching for any other mentions of the project, but found nothing. Just as I was about to close the book, I noticed something odd about the back cover. It seemed slightly thicker than it should be. I ran my fingers along the edges and felt a slight separation in the leather. Not damage, but a deliberate concealment. Someone had created a hidden pocket in the back cover. With careful fingers, I worked at the seam until it gave way, revealing a folded piece of paper tucked inside. I pulled it out with trembling hands and unfolded it to find a page torn from a journal, the edges jagged where it had been ripped out. April 17th, 2023. They found something in the ice core from the deep drill site. Something that shouldn't be possible at that depth. Organic material. Perfectly preserved. Not fossilized, preserved. Emerson is ecstatic, calling it the find of the century. Carr is more cautious, says the samples are exhibiting unusual properties even in their frozen state. Cellular material reacting to stimuli despite being thousands, maybe millions of years old. April 19th, 2023. Containment protocols established for the new specimens. All research restricted to sublevel 5. Only senior staff allowed access. The military guys are getting more involved, asking a lot of questions about potential applications. I don't like where this is heading. April 23rd, 2023. First accident today. Taylor was exposed during a core sampling procedure. Said it was just a scratch, but he started acting strange almost immediately. Talking nonsense about the cold ones and what waits beneath. They've quarantined him in the medical bay. Emerson says it's just shock, maybe hypothermia, but I saw the way the wound on his arm was moving. April 25th, 2023. Taylor's gone. They're saying he was transferred to a hospital in Anchorage, but no one saw him leave, and his personal items are still in his locker. Started drafting new safety protocols for the night staff. If whatever's in those samples gets loose, they need to know what they're dealing with. Emerson caught me and said security protocols are above my pay grade. Had to hide my notes. April 26th, 2023. Something's wrong with Emerson. He canceled all his meetings today, and when I saw him in the corridor, he didn't recognize me at first. Just stared blankly until I said his name. Then he smiled too widely and called me colleague instead of Susan like he usually does. Others are acting strange too, forming cliques, whispering when certain people walk by. I'm leaving these notes for whoever finds them. If you're reading this, be careful. They're watching. I think they've already taken over most of the day shift. The rules I've been adding to the maintenance book are the best protection I can offer. Pay attention to them. They reveal patterns in the entity's behavior, weaknesses. Remember, Rule 0. Nothing leaves the ice that was not there before. That's the key to all of this. Whatever was found has been frozen for a reason. It needs to go back. Dr. Susan Vox. Dr. Vox. The same name the creature outside had used. Had it known about the real Dr. Vox? Had it already impersonated her? Or worse, had it been her all along, testing me? I checked my watch. 5:13 a.m. Still hours before extraction was possible. I was about to return the journal page to its hiding place when the satellite phone rang, its shrill tone shattering the silence. I lunged for it, nearly dropping the receiver in my haste. Hello? Checkpoint Alpha, this is contingency response, said the same neutral voice from earlier. Status report. I'm alone, I replied quickly. Something, one of them, found me, tried to get me to open the door. Claimed to be a Dr. Vox from the facility. A beat of silence. What happened? I refused to let it in. It threatened me, then left. I think it's still out there, waiting. Understood. Weather conditions are improving faster than projected. Extraction team ETA now 0700 hours. 2 hours from now. Maintain position and remain vigilant. 2 hours. I could last 2 more hours. I found something, I said, deciding to trust this anonymous voice over the satellite connection. A hidden note from a Dr. Susan Vox about Project Thaw. It mentions finding something in ice cores, people acting strange afterward, staff disappearing. The line went silent for so long I thought I'd lost the connection. Finally, the voice returned, noticeably less composed than before. Repeat the name of the project. Project Thaw. Another long pause. Stand by, Checkpoint Alpha. The line went dead, leaving me once again in silence, save for the howling wind outside. I stared at the phone, wondering what about the project name had caused such a reaction. Was the person on the other end checking records? Consulting superiors? Or were they, too, one of the things from the ice, assessing how much I knew? The waiting was unbearable. I paced the small cabin, gun in one hand, Dr. Vox's journal page in the other. I reread her final entry. Rule 0. Nothing leaves the ice that was not there before. That's the key to all of this. Whatever was found has been frozen for a reason. It needs to go back. The false Dr. Emerson had mentioned the same rule. Rule 0. Nothing leaves the ice that was not there before. But what did it mean practically? How could anything be put back into the ancient ice it came from? The satellite phone rang again, startling me from my thoughts. I snatched it up. Hello? Checkpoint Alpha, new instructions, the voice said, now crisp and authoritative. Extraction team has been redirected. Facility 7432-B has been designated for emergency protocol whiteout. I repeat, emergency protocol whiteout is now in effect. What does that mean? I asked, panic rising in my chest. It means you need to get as far from the facility as possible in the next 90 minutes. Transport is being arranged at new coordinates. The voice rattled off a string of numbers that meant nothing to me. I don't understand. I don't have any way to navigate to coordinates in a blizzard. Use your badge, the voice replied matter-of-factly. The tracking function works both ways. It will lead you to the extraction point. 90 minutes, Mr. Nash. After that, there will be no further extraction attempts. The line went dead with finality. I stood frozen, trying to process what I'd just heard. Emergency protocol whiteout, the urgency in the voice, the redirect of the extraction team. None of it boded well. With shaking hands, I gathered what supplies I could carry: extra food, water, the first aid kit. I checked the pistol one more time, making sure the safety was off. Then, wearing every layer of cold weather gear the cabin had provided, I approached the door. My hand hesitated on the handle. What if the creature was still outside waiting? What if this was all an elaborate trap to get me to leave the relative safety of the cabin? But staying meant certain death if protocol whiteout was what I feared it might be. Some kind of scorched earth containment measure. The military didn't take chances with things like this. I took a deep breath and eased the door open a crack. The storm had lessened considerably, visibility now extending 20 or 30 feet. The snow had drifted high against the cabin, forming a small wall I'd need to climb over. But most importantly, there was no sign of the creature. Stepping outside, I was immediately assaulted by the cold, far more intense than I'd experienced during my earlier trek to the cabin. The temperature had dropped further as the night progressed. My breath froze instantly in my beard, creating a stiff mask of ice around my face. I pulled out my badge, which was still pulsing with that eerie blue light. As before, the pulses strengthened when I faced a certain direction, now northeast, away from the facility. This was it then, my only hope of survival. I trudged through the snow, each step a monumental effort. The wind had died down somewhat, but the cold was, if anything, more brutal without the blowing snow to insulate the air. Every breath felt like inhaling shards of glass. 20 minutes into my journey, I heard it, a low, distant rumble that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I turned, scanning the horizon behind me. Far in the distance, where I knew the facility to be, a faint blue glow was visible even through the remaining snowfall. As I watched, the glow intensified, spreading outward like a ripple on a pond. The rumbling grew louder, and the ground beneath my feet began to tremble. In that moment, I understood what emergency protocol whiteout truly meant. They weren't evacuating the facility. They were destroying it and everything inside. I turned and ran as best I could through the deep snow, no longer caring about the strain on my lungs or the danger of frostbite. Behind me, the blue glow had become a pillar of light shooting into the sky, pulsing in rhythm with my badge. The explosion, when it came, was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Not a sharp crack or boom, but a deep subsonic pressure wave that I felt more than heard. It lifted me off my feet and threw me face first into the snow. When I managed to raise my head, I saw a sight that defied comprehension. Where Facility 7432-B had stood was now a perfect hemisphere of ice, glowing with the same blue light as my badge. It rose at least 100 feet above the surface, like a massive frozen bubble. Rule 0. Nothing leaves the ice that was not there before. They hadn't destroyed the facility. They'd frozen it, and everything inside, back into the permafrost where it belonged. My badge gave one last bright pulse, then went dark. The distant ice dome continued to glow. In the new illumination, I could make out a shape in the distance, the silhouette of a helicopter, waiting at what must be the extraction coordinates. I pulled myself to my feet and staggered toward it, not daring to look back again at what remained of Facility 7432-B and the horrors it had contained. Whether they'd all been trapped in the ice, I couldn't be sure. But one thing was certain. My nights of following bizarre rules in that place were over. As I approached the helicopter, a thought struck me cold. How would I know if the extraction team was real, or just more of the ice things in disguise? The helicopter's rotors sliced through the Arctic air, kicking up a swirl of powdery snow as I approached. It was a military model, matte black with no markings, designed for stealth rather than visibility. Two figures in white Arctic camouflage stood beside it, their faces obscured by balaclavas and night vision goggles. I slowed my approach, the question still burning in my mind. How could I know if these were really human? One of the figures spotted me and raised a hand in greeting, then gestured urgently for me to hurry. I hesitated, remembering the false Dr. Emerson and the thing that had pretended to be Dr. Vox. The creatures had been convincing, almost perfect in their mimicry, until they weren't. The second figure stepped forward, impatient, and lifted their night vision goggles. A woman's face peered out, her expression grim but undeniably human. She raised a device that looked like a handheld scanner, pointing it in my direction. "He's clean," she shouted to her companion over the noise of the rotors. "Biometric signature normal." They had a way to detect the creatures. Relief flooded through me as I closed the remaining distance, my legs nearly giving out from exhaustion as I reached them. "James Nash?" the woman asked, her voice clipped and professional. I nodded, too exhausted for words. "Lieutenant Reyes, Special Containment Division," she said, guiding me toward the helicopter. "We need to move. The cryofield is still expanding." I glanced back at the dome of blue ice, now visibly larger than it had been minutes ago. The lieutenant was right. It was growing, spreading outward from the facility in all directions. If we didn't leave soon, we'd be caught in it. The other figure, a tall, broad-shouldered man, helped me into the helicopter and strapped me into a seat before taking position at what looked like a weapons console. Lieutenant Reyes climbed into the pilot's seat and began flipping switches, bringing the engine to a higher pitch. "What about other survivors?" I shouted over the noise. Reyes turned to look at me, her expression unreadable. "You're the only one we were instructed to extract." The helicopter lifted off, banking sharply away from the expanding dome of ice. Through the window, I could see the full extent of the phenomenon now. A perfect hemisphere of glowing blue ice centered on what had been Facility 7432-B, growing steadily outward like a frozen tsunami. "What is that?" I asked, pointing at the dome. Lieutenant Reyes exchanged a glance with her companion before answering. "That's classified, Mr. Nash." "I think I've earned some answers," I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. "I just spent the night being hunted by creatures that can mimic humans perfectly. I watched them take over an entire government facility. I deserve to know what was going on there." The male operative looked at Reyes, who gave a slight nod. He reached up and removed his balaclava, revealing a weather-beaten face with a neatly trimmed beard. "Captain Daniel Hodge," he introduced himself. "And you're right. You do deserve some answers, but not all of them. Not yet. What's your clearance level?" "Clearance level?" I repeated, confused. "I'm just a janitor." Hodge actually laughed at that, though there was no humor in it. "Just a janitor." Right, and they gave just a janitor the rule book and an ID badge with embedded quantum tracking technology. He shook his head. You might not know it, Nash, but you were more than a janitor. You were a canary in the coal mine. I stared at him, trying to process his words. A test subject? You were experimenting on me? Not an experiment. Lieutenant Reyes cut in, her eyes still on the controls. A failsafe. The night staff at facilities like 7432-B are our early warning system. You follow the rules, you report anomalies, and if something goes catastrophically wrong. She gestured toward the growing dome of ice behind us. You help us contain it. The badge, I said, pulling it from my pocket. It remained dark now, lifeless. It was monitoring me the whole time? Monitoring the facility through you? Hodge corrected. All those rules you followed? Each one was designed to test specific areas and systems for contamination or breach. Every time you completed your rounds following the rules, you were actually conducting a sophisticated security sweep. The badge recorded everything: temperature variations, molecular anomalies, chronological distortions. My mind reeled. All those months of following bizarre, seemingly arbitrary rules had actually had a purpose. But why not tell me? Why not use actual security personnel? Because they know what to look for, Reyes explained, banking the helicopter to avoid a particularly strong gust of wind. The entities can sense that and hide accordingly. But someone who doesn't know what they're really doing? Who's just following rules by rote? You were essentially invisible to them, until tonight. I remembered the false Dr. Emerson's words. We need you intact to maintain our cover during night hours. They hadn't just been hunting me, they'd been trying to replace me, to take over my role in whatever security system I'd unwittingly been a part of. What were they? I asked. The things in the ice. Hodge's expression darkened. That's above both our pay grades, Nash. All I know is they're designated as chronological anomalies. Something to do with biological material that shouldn't exist at the depths they found it. The eggheads have a lot of theories: time distortions in the ice, visitor entities from other dimensions, even modified human genetics from some future scenario. All I know is they can mimic us, they're adaptive as hell, and they really, really don't like being frozen. Project Thaw, I said. Dr. Vox's notes mentioned it. Reyes visibly tensed at the name. You found Vox's notes? Where? I patted my pocket where I'd stored the journal page. Hidden in the rulebook. She suspected something was wrong with Dr. Emerson and others as far back as April. She was trying to warn the night staff. Susan Vox was one of the good ones, Hodge said quietly. She tried to shut down the project when she realized what was happening. Officially, she was transferred to another facility in May. Unofficially, he trailed off, but his meaning was clear. The helicopter continued to push through the night, the dome of ice now just a blue glow on the horizon behind us. According to the digital display near the pilot's controls, we were heading south-southeast, away from the facility, and toward what I assumed was a more populous area of Alaska. Where are we going? I asked. Debriefing facility first, Reyes replied. After that, it depends on how much you know and how well you handle the classification protocols. Meaning? Hodge leaned forward. Meaning, if you can keep your mouth shut about what happened tonight, you might get to go back to something resembling a normal life. If not, he shrugged. There are other facilities that need night janitors. The casual threat hung in the air between us. I'd escaped one nightmare only to find myself in a different kind of trap. Before I could respond, a red light began flashing on the control panel, accompanied by an urgent beeping. What's that? I asked, new fear clutching at my chest. Reyes cursed, flipping switches and checking readings. Proximity alert. Something's following us. Hodge immediately moved to the weapons console, powering up systems that hummed to life around him. How is that possible? Nothing could have survived that containment protocol. Evidently, something did, Reyes snapped. She turned to me. Your badge, is it still inactive? I checked the ID badge again. It remained dark, but as I held it, I noticed something disturbing. It was warm to the touch, almost hot, as if some energy within it was building. It's heating up, I said, suddenly afraid to keep holding it. Throw it out, Hodge barked, reaching for the nearest window. But before I could move, the badge flared to life again, the blue glow returning with eye-searing intensity. I dropped it to the floor of the helicopter with a cry of pain as the plastic melted and warped, the material flowing like liquid. It's one of them! Reyes shouted, fighting to keep the helicopter steady as she accelerated to maximum speed. It used the badge to track us. The melted plastic of the badge continued to flow, expanding across the floor of the helicopter. It began to take form, stretching upward into a vaguely humanoid shape, its surface rippling with bioluminescent blue patterns. Two orbs that might have been eyes formed in what approximated a head, fixing me with an unblinking stare. Hello again, James Nash, it said, its voice a perfect recreation of Dr. Emerson's professional tone. Did you really think Rule 0 applied only to the facility? Hodge was already firing, the helicopter's mounted guns spraying the entity with a barrage of bullets that seemed to pass right through it, causing momentary disruptions in its form that quickly resealed. That won't work, the creature said almost conversationally. We've evolved beyond such primitive threats. It turned its attention to Reyes. Lieutenant Maria Reyes, Special Containment Division, Security Clearance Umbra 7. You believe you understand what we are. You don't. Reyes didn't respond, focused entirely on flying the helicopter at breakneck speed. But I could see the fear in the tight set of her jaw, the whiteness of her knuckles on the controls. The creature continued to grow, its mass expanding impossibly beyond what the small badge could have contained. It stretched toward the ceiling of the helicopter, forcing Hodge to back away from his weapons console. What do you want? I asked, trying to draw its attention away from the others. The thing that had been my badge turned those glowing orbs toward me again. To correct a misconception, you think we were trapped in the ice, preserved there against our will. The truth is more complex. We weren't preserved in the ice. It paused, the area where its mouth should be stretching into a smile like rictus. We are the ice. A chill that had nothing to do with the Arctic night ran down my spine. What does that mean? It means, the creature continued, that your little containment protocol didn't imprison us. It freed more of us. Every molecule of that expanding ice dome contains our consciousness, our essence, and it's still growing. Hodge had given up on the mounted gun and drawn a sidearm that glowed with the same blue energy as the creature, some kind of specialized weapon. Don't listen to it, he warned me. They lie. It's what they do. Do we? Captain Daniel Hodge? The creature asked, turning its attention to him. Then explain why your superiors never told you about the previous containment breaches. Explain why this facility was built on the same site where a similar discovery was made in 1967. Explain why your own father disappeared during that project. Hodge faltered, the weapon in his hand wavering slightly. How do you know about my father? We know everything about all of you, the creature said. We've been absorbing human knowledge for decades, each time we're discovered and contained, each cycle making us stronger, more complete. It turned back to me. Your rules were never meant to contain us, James. They were meant to teach us. Human behaviors, human limitations, human vulnerabilities. The helicopter lurched suddenly as Reyes made a sharp, evasive maneuver. It's stalling us, she shouted. Hodge, take the shot now. Hodge seemed to snap out of his momentary confusion, raising the glowing weapon and firing in one fluid motion. A bolt of brilliant blue energy, the same color as the creature's bioluminescence, struck it directly in the center mass. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The creature screeched, a sound that threatened to shatter both the helicopter's windows and my eardrums. Its form began to fracture, cracks of white light spreading through the blue mass like lightning through a storm cloud. Thermal reversal, Hodge explained tersely. Drops its molecular structure to near absolute zero. Fight ice with ice. The creature thrashed wildly as it began to crystallize from within, its movements becoming jerky and uncoordinated. But even as it died, it kept speaking, its voice now a chorus of dozens overlapping. "This changes nothing," it hissed. "We are already free, already spreading. Alaska was just the beginning. The Arctic ice is vast, and we are in all of it now, melting, flowing, reaching the oceans." Its form had almost completely crystallized, becoming a jagged sculpture of impossible angles and frozen fractals in the middle of the helicopter cabin. "We'll see you again, James Nash," it said, its voice fading to a whisper. "When the ice reaches your home, when the snow falls on your windows, when your breath forms clouds in winter air, we'll be there, waiting, learning, growing." With a final violent spasm, the creature shattered into thousands of tiny ice fragments that scattered across the helicopter floor. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound the roar of the helicopter's engine as Reyes guided us through the night sky. "Is it dead?" I finally asked. Hodge was already collecting the fragments into a specialized containment case. "This one is, for now." What did it mean about the Arctic ice? About reaching the oceans? Reyes and Hodge exchanged grim looks, but didn't answer. Instead, Reyes checked our coordinates and adjusted our course slightly. "We're diverting to Emergency Containment Site Bravo," she announced. "All prior protocols suspended." "What does that mean for me?" I asked, suddenly afraid of what might be waiting at our destination. Hodge snapped the containment case shut and secured it before turning to me. His expression was somber, but not unkind. "It means your debriefing just got a lot more complicated," he said, "and your options just narrowed considerably." He glanced out the window at the distant glow of the ice dome, now just a faint blue smudge on the horizon. If what that thing said is true, even partially true, we're going to need people who understand what we're dealing with. People who've encountered them firsthand and survived. "You want me to help you fight them?" I said, not a question, but a realization. Hodge's smile was grim. "Welcome to the Special Containment Division, Mr. Nash. I hope you're a quick learner. Where you're going, the rules are a lot more complicated than what you're used to." The helicopter continued south through the night, carrying me away from one nightmare and toward another. Behind us, under the frozen Alaska landscape, something ancient and patient continued to spread, molecule by molecule, through the permanent ice of the Arctic Circle, something that had learned our rules all too well. The emergency containment site looked nothing like what I'd expected. As the helicopter descended toward what appeared to be an ordinary airfield surrounded by dense pine forest, I'd imagined we'd be landing at another military facility, all concrete walls and chain-link fences topped with razor wire. Instead, we touched down on a small landing pad beside what looked like a luxury ski lodge, complete with wooden beams and picture windows reflecting the first hints of dawn. "This is a containment facility?" I asked as Hodge helped me out of the helicopter, my legs cramping after the tense hours of flight. "Best place to hide something is in plain sight," he replied, shouldering the case containing the frozen fragments of the creature. This is officially the Denali Executive Retreat, a high-end vacation spot for government officials and corporate partners. Unofficially, it's Special Containment Division's Alaska headquarters. Lieutenant Reyes was already striding toward the main building, speaking urgently into a comm device attached to her collar. 2 more operatives in civilian winter gear had emerged from the lodge and were approaching the helicopter, presumably to secure it and its contents. "What happens now?" I asked, jogging to keep up with Hodge's long strides as we followed Reyes. "Now," Hodge said, "you get the crash course in what you're really dealing with, assuming you've been cleared for it." He glanced at me. "How's your security clearance these days, Janitor?" Before I could answer, we reached the main entrance of the lodge, where a suited man with close-cropped silver hair was waiting. Despite the early hour and the emergency situation, he looked perfectly put together, not a wrinkle on his charcoal suit or a hair out of place. "Captain Hodge," he greeted, then turned to me. "And Mr. Nash, I'm Director Blackwood. Welcome to Site Bravo." He extended his hand, and I shook it automatically, noting the firm grip and the calculating look in his pale blue eyes as he assessed me. "Thank you for extracting me," I said, unsure of the proper protocol. "Don't thank me yet," Blackwood replied with a thin smile. "Lieutenant Reyes tells me we have a significant situation on our hands. Please, follow me." He led us inside, past what appeared to be a normal lobby with a reception desk and comfortable seating, to an elevator at the back of the building. Unlike the plain utilitarian elevators at Facility 7432-B, this one was paneled in rich cherry wood with brass fixtures. Blackwood pressed his palm to a discreet scanner beside the control panel, then entered a code on a keypad that appeared. The elevator began to descend. "How much has Captain Hodge briefed you on our operation, Mr. Nash?" Blackwood asked conversationally, as if we were discussing the weather rather than ice entities that could mimic humans. "Not much," I admitted. "Just that I was apparently more than a janitor at the facility." Blackwood nodded. "Indeed. Though your janitorial duties were real enough, your primary function was surveillance and early anomaly detection. Your rule book and badge were sophisticated monitoring tools that allowed us to track changes and aberrations in the facility's contained specimens." "The creatures," I said. "What are they really?" The elevator continued its descent, going much deeper than I would have expected. Finally, it stopped, and the doors slid open to reveal a stark contrast to the rustic luxury above. Here was the facility I'd been expecting: sterile white corridors, reinforced doors, and uniformed personnel moving with purpose. "That," Blackwood said as we stepped out, "is what we're going to show you." He led us down a series of corridors, each requiring different security clearances to access. Finally, we arrived at a large circular room that reminded me of a university lecture hall, with tiered seating facing a central presentation area. Several people in lab coats and military uniforms were already gathered, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. "Please take a seat," Blackwood directed me toward the front row. "Captain Hodge, have those samples been secured?" Hodge patted the containment case. "Yes, sir. Delivering them to Dr. Patel now." As Hodge left with the case, I took a seat as instructed. Lieutenant Reyes positioned herself near the door, her posture alert despite what must have been an exhausting night. Blackwood took center stage, activating a holographic display that sprang to life in the middle of the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, as you've been briefed, we've experienced a Category 4 containment breach at Facility 7432-B. Emergency Protocol Whiteout has been implemented, but we have reason to believe it may have been compromised." Murmurs spread through the assembled group. Blackwood continued, bringing up an image on the display that made my blood run cold. A perfect recreation of the blue ice dome I'd seen expanding over the facility. Current satellite imagery shows the cryogenic containment field continuing to expand at a rate of approximately 3 meters per hour. At this pace, it will reach the nearest civilian settlement in 4 days. A woman in a lab coat stood. "Director, is there any sign of the molecular restructuring we observed in the 2018 incident?" "Not yet, Dr. Patel, but we're monitoring closely. Captain Hodge is bringing you fresh samples for analysis." Blackwood turned to address the entire room. "What we're dealing with, people, is potentially an FK-class foreign kinetics scenario. The entities are adapting faster than our models predicted, and they're demonstrating capabilities we haven't documented before." He turned to me suddenly. "Mr. Nash, you had direct contact with these entities. In your own words, can you describe their behavior and capabilities?" All eyes in the room turned to me. I swallowed hard, gathering my thoughts. "They can perfectly mimic people," I began. "Not just appearance, but voice, mannerisms, knowledge, at least for a while. The longer they talk, the more wrong they start to seem. One impersonated Dr. Emerson, knew details about the facility and staff that only he would know." I took a deep breath before continuing. "They can change their physical form. I saw one melt and reshape itself. Bullets didn't hurt it. They communicate with each other somehow, even at a distance, and they said they're not preserved in the ice. They said they are the ice." The room fell silent at this last statement. Blackwood's expression remained impassive, but I noticed his knuckles whitening as he gripped the edge of the podium. "That confirms our worst fears," he said finally. "Dr. Patel, your assessment?" The woman who had spoken earlier stepped forward. She was middle-aged, with streaks of gray in her dark hair and deep lines around her eyes that spoke of years of stress. "Based on preliminary data," she said, "I believe we're dealing with a form of conscious molecular structure that can integrate with and control water molecules in various states. Not a conventional parasite or organism, but something more like a pattern that rewrites the fundamental properties of water itself." "A pattern?" I asked, confused. Dr. Patel turned to me. "Think of it like computer code, Mr. Nash. These entities appear to function as a kind of reprogramming sequence for H2O molecules, changing their behavior at a quantum level. When they enter a new water source, whether liquid, ice, or vapor, they begin converting it, molecule by molecule, into an extension of themselves. Essentially, they're not creatures in ice. They're sentient ice." The implications hit me like a physical blow. "The Arctic is mostly ice," I said slowly. "And if they reach the ocean?" "Precisely," Blackwood cut in. "Which is why Protocol Whiteout was designed to refreeze them in a contained, controlled manner that would override their molecular pattern with our own. It seems, however, they've found a way to subvert even that." He brought up a new image on the display, a map of the Arctic Circle, with pulsing red dots at various locations. "These are all sites where similar entities have been discovered and contained over the past 60 years. We believed each incident was isolated. We were wrong." The map zoomed out to show the entire northern hemisphere, thin blue lines now connecting all the red dots in a web-like pattern. "Underground water tables," Blackwood explained. "Glacial movement. Ocean currents. They've been spreading slowly, almost imperceptibly, for decades. Every containment we thought was successful was actually just slowing them down while they learned and adapted." "Why not just destroy them?" someone asked from the back of the room. "Extreme heat? Nuclear options?" Dr. Patel shook her head. Conventional weapons are useless. Extreme heat just converts them to vapor form, accelerating their spread. Nuclear options might work on a small scale, but the radiation actually seems to speed up their molecular reprogramming capabilities. The thermal reversal weapon worked, I pointed out, remembering how Hodge had dispatched the creature in the helicopter. Temporarily, Blackwood agreed. It forces them back into a dormant state by dropping their temperature below their operational threshold. But it's expensive, limited in range, and only buys us time. I felt a creeping sense of helplessness. So what's the plan? There is a plan, right? Blackwood's expression was grim. There's always a plan, Mr. Nash. But first, we need to understand exactly what we're facing. He nodded to someone at the back of the room, and the lights dimmed further. What you're about to see is classified beyond top secret. Even most of our field operatives aren't aware of its existence. The holographic display changed to show what looked like historical footage, grainy, black and white, dated 1908. Tunguska, Siberia, Blackwood narrated. Officially recorded as a meteor impact. In reality, the first documented encounter with these entities. A Russian research team found something in the ice that, according to their journals, moved like life, but shone like death. The footage showed men in early 20th century cold weather gear examining something glowing in a chunk of ice. The recording was poor quality, but even through the graininess, I could make out the now familiar blue luminescence. Every member of that expedition died within a week, Blackwood continued, but not before they shipped samples back to St. Petersburg for further study. The display changed again, showing more recent footage, a modern research station built on Arctic ice. 1967 Operation Permafrost, the first American contact, led by Dr. William Hodge. I glanced toward the door where Hodge had exited earlier, understanding now why the creature's words about his father had affected him so strongly. Dr. Hodge theorized that these entities weren't extraterrestrial as initially suspected, but rather terrestrial organisms from an earlier phase of Earth's development, possibly billions of years old, preserved in the deepest ice and gradually rising to the surface through geological processes. The footage showed scientists in a lab gathered around a container glowing with that same blue light. One scientist, a man who bore a striking resemblance to Captain Hodge, was speaking directly to the camera, his expression excited but cautious. "We're observing what appears to be non-standard molecular behavior," the recorded Dr. Hodge was saying. "The ice doesn't just contain the bioluminescent organism, it's becoming the organism. Water molecules are being restructured on contact, creating a kind of molecular virus, for lack of a better term." The footage abruptly cut to chaos. Alarms blaring, people running, the blue glow now spreading across the laboratory floor and walls. "The containment failed," Blackwood said quietly. 27 personnel lost. The facility was purged with experimental cryoweapons, and we thought the threat eliminated. We were wrong. The display cycled through more incidents. 1983, 1997, 2005, 2018, each showing similar patterns of discovery, containment, breach, and emergency response. And now, 2025, Blackwood concluded, bringing the display back to the current situation. Facility 7432-B, our most advanced containment and research site, compromised. But this time, we have something we've never had before. He turned to look directly at me. A witness who interacted extensively with the entities and survived. Someone who knows their behaviors, their limitations, and most importantly, their vulnerabilities. I blinked in surprise. Me? But I'm just a janitor, yes, Blackwood finished for me. A janitor who successfully evaded creatures that have killed trained soldiers and brilliant scientists. A janitor who found Dr. Vox's notes when our own security teams couldn't. A janitor who identified and exploited a weakness in their cognitive processing by creating paradoxes. He stepped closer, his intense gaze locked on mine. Tell me, Mr. Nash, did you ever wonder why you were hired at Facility 7432-B in the first place? Why, out of all the applicants, they chose someone with no special qualifications or experience? I hadn't, until now. I assumed they were desperate. The job posting mentioned high turnover. A thin smile crossed Blackwood's face. Your psychological profile, Mr. Nash. It showed unusually high pattern recognition abilities combined with a remarkable capacity for following structured rules without questioning their purpose. The perfect candidate for our monitoring program. He placed a hand on my shoulder. And now, the perfect candidate for something more important. We need you, Mr. Nash. Not as a janitor, but as a consultant. Someone who can help us understand these entities and find a way to permanently contain them before they reach the oceans and become truly unstoppable. I looked around the room at the assembled scientists and military personnel, all watching me expectantly. Just hours ago, I'd been mopping floors in an underground facility, following bizarre rules I barely understood. Now, I was being asked to help save the world from sentient ice. Do I have a choice? I asked. Blackwood's smile never reached his eyes. There's always a choice, Mr. Nash. But given what you know, what you've seen, can you really walk away? I thought of Eliza, the friendly receptionist whose fate I still didn't know. Of Dr. Susan Vox, who tried to warn others and paid the price. Of the thing in the helicopter, promising to find me again, wherever ice and snow existed. What do you need me to do? I asked. Blackwood nodded, satisfied. First, we need you to tell us everything. Every rule you followed, every anomaly you observed, every interaction with the entities. No detail is too small. He turned to the assembled team. Prepare the cognitive mapping chamber. We're going to extract every useful piece of information from Mr. Nash's experiences. As people began to move with renewed purpose, Lieutenant Reyes appeared at my side. For what it's worth, she said quietly, I think you're making the right choice. Is it really a choice when the alternative is the end of the world? I asked. She gave me a grim smile. Welcome to the Special Containment Division, Nash. That's the only kind of choice we ever get. The cognitive mapping chamber resembled something between a high-tech medical room and an interrogation cell. The walls were lined with screens displaying brain activity patterns and vital signs. In the center stood a reclining chair that reminded me uncomfortably of a dentist's office, equipped with restraints that Dr. Patel assured me were just a precaution. The process isn't painful, she explained as technicians attached electrodes to my temples and wrists. Think of it as an enhanced interview. The neural interface allows us to visualize your memories as you recall them, making details you might have forgotten or overlooked accessible to our team. I eyed the restraints warily. And those? Some subjects experience involuntary muscle responses during intense memory recall, she said matter-of-factly. The restraints prevent injury. That's reassuring, I muttered. Dr. Patel offered a tired smile. I understand your hesitation, Mr. Nash, but this technology has been refined over decades. It's safe and non-invasive. I didn't point out that safe and comfortable were very different things. Instead, I settled back in the chair, trying to relax as the technicians finished their preparations. Director Blackwood entered, accompanied by Captain Hodge and Lieutenant Reyes. Everything set? He asked Dr. Patil. She nodded, making a final adjustment to one of the monitors. Beginning cognitive mapping sequence in 3, 2, 1. A warm sensation spread from the electrodes at my temples, followed by a curious feeling of mental expansion, as if my thoughts were suddenly occupying more space. On the largest screen, abstract patterns of light began to form, shifting and coalescing like living watercolors. "Mr. Nash," Dr. Patil's voice seemed to come from both inside and outside my head simultaneously. "I want you to think back to your first day at Facility 7432-B. Remember your orientation, your first introduction to the rules." The patterns on the screen shifted, forming more concrete shapes. The sterile hallways of the facility, Dr. Emerson's office where I'd first received my badge and rulebook. The memory was sharper than I expected, with details I hadn't consciously registered. The slight tremor in Dr. Emerson's left hand as he passed me the rulebook. The way his eyes had darted to a specific camera in the corner when explaining certain rules. The faint blue discoloration at the edges of his fingernails that I'd attributed to poor circulation in the cold facility. "Interesting," murmured Dr. Patil. "Dr. Emerson was already showing signs of infiltration during your orientation, though at an early stage." "That's not possible," Blackwood cut in. "Emerson passed weekly screenings. His last clear result was 3 days before Nash's orientation." "Then they were already defeating our screening methods," Reyes said grimly. "We need to revisit all personnel records from the past year." The questioning continued, moving chronologically through my 6 months at the facility. I relived night after night of following the rulebook's strange instructions, avoiding certain rooms at specific times, never looking directly into dark corners on sublevel 3, always wiping down the east stairwell from top to bottom, never bottom to top. What had seemed like arbitrary rules now revealed themselves as a sophisticated monitoring system. The patterns on the screen showed subtle anomalies that had been invisible to me but registered by my badge. Temperature fluctuations, molecular disturbances, spatial irregularities that appeared as ripples in the visual representation of my memories. The entities were testing boundaries, Dr. Patil explained as we watched a memory from 3 weeks ago, me carefully avoiding a puddle of clear liquid in Corridor B on sublevel 2. Each rule you followed created a pattern of behavior they had to work around. It forced them to reveal themselves in small ways we could detect and track. When we reached the events of last night, the mood in the room shifted. Everyone leaned forward, studying the screens intently as I relived my encounter with the false Dr. Emerson, my escape to the checkpoint cabin, and the helicopter extraction. "Stop!" Blackwood commanded suddenly as the memory reached the creature's final words in the helicopter. "Replay that section." Dr. Patil adjusted something on her console, and the memory rewound. The shattered creature's voice filled the room again. "We'll see you again, James Nash. When the ice reaches your home. When the snow falls on your windows. When your breath forms clouds in winter air. We'll be there, waiting, learning, growing." "There's something in the vocalization pattern," Blackwood said. "Dr. Patil, can you isolate the frequency variations?" She nodded, manipulating controls on her interface. The creature's voice separated into distinct layers on the screen. The superficial human speech pattern overlaid on something else, something that looked like a complex waveform oscillating in perfect mathematical sequences. "It's a data transmission," Hodge said, stepping closer to the display. "Hidden in the voice." Dr. Patil's fingers flew over her console. "Not just data, it's a recursive algorithm. The entity wasn't just threatening you, Mr. Nash. It was encoding information in its final communication." "Information for what purpose?" I asked, growing increasingly uneasy in my restrained position. "For reproduction," came a new voice from the doorway. All heads turned to see an elderly man in a wheelchair being pushed into the room by an assistant. Despite his age and frail appearance, he carried an aura of authority that immediately commanded attention. "Dr. Hodge," Blackwood acknowledged with evident surprise. "I wasn't informed you were joining us." The old man, Captain Hodge's father, I realized, waved a dismissive hand. When I heard a civilian had made direct contact with the entities and survived, I decided my retirement could wait. He wheeled himself closer to the displays, studying them with keen interest. "These patterns are consistent with what we observed in 67, just more evolved, more refined." He turned to me, his eyes sharp despite his aged appearance. "You've done well to survive, young man. Most who encounter them directly don't live to tell about it." "William," Blackwood said carefully, "we haven't fully briefed Mr. Nash on all aspects of the situation. Perhaps we should—" "There isn't time for your bureaucratic hand-holding, Marcus," Dr. Hodge cut him off. "The cryofield is expanding faster than your models predicted, isn't it? The sentient ice is adapting to our containment methods, just as I warned it would decades ago." Blackwood's expression tightened, but he didn't contradict the older scientist. Dr. Hodge turned back to me. "What you encountered, Mr. Nash, isn't just an entity or a collection of entities. It's a distributed consciousness that exists across states of matter, primarily water in all its forms. Ice is its preferred state because it slows molecular movement, allowing for more complex thought patterns. But it can exist in liquid or even vapor form when necessary, albeit with reduced cognitive function." "You're saying it's one organism?" I asked. "Spread throughout the Arctic?" "More accurate to call it a singular consciousness with multiple instantiations," Dr. Hodge replied. "Think of it like a network. Each node, what you perceive as an individual creature, is actually an extension of the whole. When one learns something, that information propagates throughout the entire network via molecular exchanges." He gestured to the waveform still displayed on the screen. "That transmission your creature sent wasn't a threat. It was updating the network with everything it learned from you and the containment team. Everything about your behaviors, about our weapons, about our extraction protocols. It was ensuring that even in death, its knowledge wouldn't be lost." A cold dread settled in my stomach. "So they're all learning from my encounter?" "Precisely," Dr. Hodge confirmed. "And they've been learning from every encounter for decades. But something changed recently." He looked to Blackwood. "You found something new at Facility 7432-B, didn't you?" "Something beyond the usual specimens?" Blackwood hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Core sample from the deep drill site, approximately 2.7 million years old, extracted from a depth of over 2 miles. The molecular structure was different, more complex." "You found their central node," Dr. Hodge said, a hint of excitement breaking through his professional demeanor. "Their equivalent of a brain, and you woke it up." The implication struck me like a physical blow. "That's why everything escalated so quickly, why they infiltrated the facility so thoroughly." "Yes," Dr. Hodge confirmed. "Previous encounters were with what amounts to the entity's autonomous subsystems. Dangerous, but limited in their cognitive capabilities. What was awakened at 7432-B was something far more sophisticated." He wheeled himself over to my chair, studying my face intently. "You said you used paradoxes against them. Tell me exactly how." I recounted my confrontation with the false Dr. Emerson, how I'd created contradictions it couldn't process. Dr. Hodge nodded thoughtfully. "Logical paradoxes disrupt their molecular processing patterns," he explained. "Their consciousness operates on quantum principles that require logical consistency. Forcing them to process contradictory information creates a cascade failure in their molecular structure, temporarily. at least. Which means we might have a weakness to exploit, Blackwood interjected. Dr. Patel, could we develop a delivery system for paradoxical information patterns? Something that could be deployed against the expanding cryofield? Dr. Patel frowned in concentration. Theoretically, yes. We could encode paradoxical algorithms into sonic or electromagnetic pulses directed at the ice, but the effect would be localized and temporary at best. Unless, Dr. Hodge said slowly, we target the central node directly. He turned to Blackwood. The deep core sample, was it completely removed from its original position? No, Blackwood replied. We extracted only a small portion for study. The main mass remains in situ, though likely altered by now. Dr. Hodge's eyes lit up. Then we have a chance. A small one, but a chance nonetheless. He turned to address the room. What we need is a delivery system that can penetrate 2 miles of ice to reach the central node, then deploy a paradox algorithm powerful enough to disrupt the entire network. Like a virus, I suggested, thinking out loud. Something that spreads through their molecular network the same way their consciousness does. Dr. Hodge pointed at me, nodding vigorously. Exactly. A paradox virus that replicates through their own communication channels. He turned to Dr. Patil. We'd need to encode it in a format they would instinctively absorb and process, something mimicking their own molecular signatures. Dr. Patil was already typing rapidly on her console. It's possible. Difficult, but possible. We have samples from various encounters that could serve as templates. But delivery remains an issue. The drilling equipment at 7432-B is likely compromised, and establishing a new drill site would take weeks. We don't have weeks, Blackwood said grimly. Satellite imaging shows the cryofield expanding at an increasing rate. At current progression, it will reach the ocean in 5 days. The room fell silent as the enormity of the situation sank in. Then, unexpectedly, Captain Hodge spoke up from his position by the door. What about Nash's badge? He suggested. The entity was able to track us through it, which means it maintained a connection to the network even after being physically separated. Dr. Patil straightened. He's right. The quantum entanglement properties we observed in the badge fragments could provide a direct channel to the central node, bypassing the need for physical delivery. We'd need more than fragments, Dr. Hodge said. We'd need a complete intact specimen that could carry the paradox virus back to the source. All eyes turned to me, and I immediately understood what they were suggesting. You want to use me as bait, I said, to catch another one. Not just any specimen, Dr. Hodge clarified. We need one with direct exposure to you, one that has absorbed your patterns, your memories, one that would be drawn to you specifically. The one impersonating Dr. Emerson, Blackwood concluded. It had the most extensive interaction with Mr. Nash and demonstrated the highest level of cognitive function. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. You want me to go back to the facility? No. Dr. Hodge shook his head. Too dangerous and likely unnecessary. These entities are drawn to patterns they recognize, particularly human patterns they've studied extensively. You, Mr. Nash, represent a pattern of significant interest to them, especially now that you've escaped their influence. So, what's the plan? I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. Dr. Hodge looked at me with something like sympathy in his aged eyes. We make you visible to them. We use your memories, your patterns, as a lure to draw out a specimen we can infect with the paradox virus. And how exactly do we do that? I asked, though the restraints on the cognitive mapping chair suddenly made me suspect I already knew. Dr. Patil hesitated before answering. We would need to extract a complete neural pattern from you. A full cognitive map that could be broadcast on frequencies the entities can detect. "You want to use my mind as bait," I translated flatly. "Just a copy," she assured me quickly. "A digital imprint. You would remain safe here while we deploy the pattern in a controlled environment." Dr. Hodge nodded grimly. "It's our best option, perhaps our only option, given the time frame we're working with." I looked around at the assembled faces, Blackwood's calculating gaze, Dr. Pattel's scientific determination, Captain Hodge's stoic professionalism, and the elder Dr. Hodge's intense focus, all waiting for my answer, though I suspected my actual consent might be a formality at this point. "What happens to me after?" I asked, assuming this works and we save the world from sentient ice. Blackwood cleared his throat. "You've been exposed to highly classified information, Mr. Nash. Returning to your previous life would be complicated. In other words, I don't have a choice," I said. "There's always a choice," Dr. Hodge said quietly. "Just not always good ones." I thought about the creature's final words in the helicopter, about ice reaching homes, snow falling on windows, breath-forming clouds in winter air, about a consciousness spreading molecule by molecule through the world's water. "Do it," I said finally. "Use my mind to catch them. But I want something in return." Blackwood raised an eyebrow. "You're hardly in a position to negotiate, Mr. Nash." "I want to know what happened to the other staff," I insisted, "especially Eliza from reception. And I want a guarantee that if this works, I get a position in your organization. Not as a test subject or a janitor, but as a full team member with clearance to know what's really happening." There was a moment of silence, broken by Dr. Hodge's unexpected laugh. "I like him," the old scientist declared. "He's got spine." He turned to Blackwood. "Give him what he wants, Marcus. If his mind is going to save humanity from a water-based apocalypse, the least we can do is treat him like a human being." Blackwood's expression remained neutral, but he gave a small nod. "Very well. Dr. Pattel, proceed with the full neural mapping. Captain Hodge, prepare the containment chamber for our fishing expedition." He turned back to me. "As for your requests, Mr. Nash, I'll have answers about the facility staff for you when you wake up." As Dr. Pattel began adjusting the equipment around me, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. My life as a simple janitor following bizarre rules was over. Something new and terrifying was beginning, a life where I knew the rules and understood their purpose, but where the stakes were infinitely higher. "Initiating full neural pattern extraction," Dr. Patil announced. "Mr. Nash, I need you to think about your encounters with the entities. Every detail, every sensation. The more complete the pattern, the more effective the lure." I closed my eyes and let the memories flow. The false Dr. Emerson's too wide smile, the thing under the door at the checkpoint cabin, the creature in the helicopter melting and reforming. As the machine hummed around me, I felt a curious doubling sensation, as if my consciousness was being photocopied, layer by layer. "Neural pattern extraction at 20%, Dr. Pattel reported. "Molecular resonance frequencies identified and isolating. This is remarkable. Mr. Nash's neural architecture shows unusual resistance to quantum interference patterns. That may explain his ability to resist cognitive manipulation by the entities." "He was the perfect canary in the coal mine," Dr. Hodge murmured, "able to detect the danger without succumbing to it." As the percentage of my extracted consciousness climbed higher on the monitors, I found my thoughts drifting to the rulebook I'd followed so diligently. All those bizarre instructions had been keeping me alive, keeping me human, while I unknowingly monitored inhuman entities. Now, the rules were changing, but the goal remained the same: survival. Neural pattern extraction complete, Dr. Patel announced as the humming of the machines reached a crescendo. Preparing for deployment. The last thing I remember before the sedative took effect was Dr. Hodge leaning close to my ear, his voice barely audible over the equipment. "Remember Rule 0, son," he whispered. "When this is over, everything goes back where it belongs. Everything." 3 months have passed since the incident at Facility 7432-B. I'm writing this from my new office at Site Bravo, where the window overlooks the dense Alaskan forest rather than the sterile underground corridors I once mopped. My title is Anomalous Pattern Analyst, which is a fancy way of saying I help identify weaknesses in things that shouldn't exist. Director Blackwood kept his word, both about my position and about the information I requested. Eliza survived, one of only 7 facility staff to escape before the cryofield expanded. She works at Site Charlie now, on the other side of the country. We video chat sometimes, comparing notes on our new lives in the shadow world of containment and secrecy. The fishing expedition worked, though not exactly as planned. The neural pattern they extracted from me successfully lured a specimen, not the false Dr. Emerson as they'd hoped, but something newer, more evolved. It came not for revenge or curiosity, but because it recognized something in my thought patterns that mirrored its own. Dr. Patel theorizes that my rule-following behavior created neural architectures similar to the entity's own structured consciousness. The paradox virus functioned perfectly. When deployed, it created a cascading failure throughout the sentient ICE network, disrupting the molecular patterns that allowed for its distributed consciousness. The expanding cryofield collapsed, receding back to its origin point deep beneath the Antarctic ice. According to our monitoring systems, the central node has returned to dormancy, its awakened consciousness fragmented by logical contradictions it couldn't resolve. We won, for now. But Dr. Hodge, the Elder One, reminds us daily that this victory is temporary. The pattern remains in the ice, damaged, but not destroyed. Given enough time, decades, centuries, millennia, it will reorganize itself, adapt to our paradoxes, and awaken again. That's why my job exists. That's why we maintain constant surveillance of the world's ice fields and monitor strange patterns in weather systems and ocean currents. That's why I still carry a modified rulebook, not for cleaning schedules, but for containment protocols and emergency responses. Sometimes, on particularly cold nights when my breath forms clouds in the air, I remember the creature's final words in the helicopter. "We'll see you again, James Nash." I believe it. Not because it survived our counterattack, but because the boundary between us and them was never as clear as we thought. Dr. Patel's latest research suggests that the sentient ice may have been influencing human evolution for millennia, subtly shaping our neural architecture through our constant interaction with water. Perhaps that's why paradoxes work against them, because they helped build the logical structures of our minds and share our vulnerabilities. Rule 0 still applies. Nothing leaves the ice that was not there before. But the corollary we've discovered is equally important. Nothing enters the ice without changing it. Every core sample, every probe, every interaction leaves an imprint. We study them, but they study us too. I still follow rules. I still mop floors sometimes when I need to think. Old habits die hard, and there's something comforting in the simple back-and-forth rhythm. But now I understand why the rules exist, and that makes all the difference. Winter is coming soon to Alaska. The first snow will fall, ice will form on the windows, and I'll watch it with new eyes, wondering if it's watching back. Not in fear, but in recognition. We are not so different, the ice and I. We both follow patterns. We both adapt. We both remember. and somewhere deep beneath the surface of the earth, something ancient sleeps and dreams of the day it will awaken again. I'll be ready when it does. James Nash, Site Bravo, Special Containment Division. October 14th, 2025.